in 2004, we built one of the world's first good drag and drop website builders. It was called Synthesite, and eventually that project was spun out as a separate company called YOLO. And in that, we reinvented the way you'd think about building websites. We had a very specific use case for it. And in a way, with Trixta, we're rebuilding the way you would think of building software. So there is some similarity. But I think the main difference was at YOLO, we had a very specific use case in mind. And at Trixta, the use cases have to be proven out themselves. And so in the early stage of building Trixta, we have been working in a theoretical vacuum at first. And it was only when we kind of narrowed in on focusing on smart contracts and working with Civic, our first customer, that it really started to become much clearer to us of how we should be building this thing. When we try and reinvent something, and something as firmly entrenched as building software, there's a natural tendency to want to hang on to the way we did things in the past. And we have to be able to move past that. And it's not easy to do. My nature is to look at things freshly. And I think the challenge is bringing that kind of childlike approach to things, but working with a real team and trying to explain the vision to them and bring them on board. That's really an interesting part of the journey. There is something quite unique about Trixta that I don't believe has been captured by other projects out there. And if you look at the history of technology over the last decade, we can see that there's more complexity coming into technology. There's new types of technologies. Machine learning has been around for a long time, but it's starting to become real now. There's emergence of the Internet of Things. Again, it's a project that's been taking its time, but it's starting to become more real. And blockchain has captured the popular imagination. Then there's cloud computing that is real and is being highly adopted by corporations now. With all of these new complex systems, it's getting harder for companies to deal with them. And organizational structures need to accommodate the way that we think about building software at the moment. Conway's law says that the structure and nature of the organization has an effect on the way we build software. The communication lines within the corporate structure or the organizational structure will tend to be built into the software structures. And so corporates that have a hard time restructuring will tend to have more rigid software. And more fluid organizations, like blockchain organizations, could have very fluid structures in their software. There has been a focus on simplifying the way that we build software from the developer perspective. Microservices have emerged to move away from monolithic systems and allow us to create decoupled, smaller bits of software that can then be orchestrated together. And firstly, it's complex for developers to deal with all these new technologies and to keep up to date and learn new things. But it's even harder for the organization to understand how to innovate around software and to work with these constantly changing technologies. And that is where Trixta comes in. Trixta allows you to model the complexity of the domain of the organization itself and the systems that you're building, all in one place. Trixta really makes it a lot easier to think about complex software and to use it. And internally as a team, what's been very exciting for me is to see that our own team are using Trixta to build Trixta. We're actually using all the mechanisms within Trixta to build itself. And what makes me really excited is when I see the aha moment in other people as they finally see why Trixta makes it easier for them. And what would be super exciting for me is if a broad number of people could actually use Trixta and build software on Trixta and recognize that they can build incredibly complex software that's deeply understandable to their organizations. In building out Trixta, we realized that the way we've always built software is not necessarily the correct way. And there's a certain truth that's emerging. It's so obvious to us why this is a better way to do it. It's hard to explain it to other people until they experience it themselves. But we believe that is what's going to change everything.